So a nurse walks in and she says, are you an organ donor? And I thought, I must be in trouble. I said, I'm pretty sure I am. And then she said, okay, and she left. And really, 5 minutes later, a different nurse walked in the room, looked at everything, and she said, are you an organ donor? And I said, well, I'm pretty sure I am. She goes, but does your driver's license say it? I'm going, I'm pretty sure. And it happened a third time, really. Within 15 minutes, I was asked 3 times if I was an organ donor. So I knew I was in trouble. And I remember it was a Saturday or a Friday, and I had this big wedding the next day. In fact, they scheduled the wedding based on my schedule, and it was with Rabbi Ted, and it was, this big thing. And I remember thinking, and they're like, we're going to take you in for surgery. We're going to move the stone. And I remember thinking, I can't have surgery. I have a big wedding tomorrow. And then I heard a voice in my head say, well, too bad, you're going to have the surgery. And then it dawned on me I'm a little slow, but 3 times asking me if I'm an organ donor. I thought, wait a minute, I may not live. And I remember the voice, and I thought, I can't die. I have children. I can't go anywhere. I have children. And I heard another voice in my head saying, you have no control over what's happening right now. And I'll never forget being on the table just before they put me out, and I looked the doctor and the anesthesiologist and the nurse, I looked them all in the eye, and I knew that my life right now was in their hands, and God's hands as well. And there was that total surrendering that happened in that moment. And when you wake up from an experience like that, you're so grateful to be alive, aren't you? You are so grateful to be alive. And the truth is that healing is a mystery. We're not sure how it happens necessarily. I mean, yeah, we can measure it and scientifically lay it out, but the truth is something happens within us sometimes that we can't quite explain. Another example is that of my dad. He was diagnosed with inoperable colon cancer. And when he went in, they opened him up and he was just, it was like, nope, nothing we can do for you. So they gave him a colostomy bag, and then they gave him palliative chemo, which is kind of like a placebo. It's like, we're going to let you think that we're helping you, but really not so much because you're pretty far along. So twice a week he went for like 20 minutes of chemo. And he heard from somebody that if you eat after chemo, then you won't get sick. And my dad loved to eat. He was a Chicago cop, and he knew every good restaurant in Chicago. So after his chemo, he would go over to a place called the Hamburger King. And the Hamburger King is this greasy spoon diner. And you could get cheeseburgers and eggs and whatever, but it also was run by this old Chinese family. And they served this incredible Asian food at the same time. And so my father would go in after his chemo, and he'd order a big bowl of soup called yucca mein. And he believed that yucca mein had healing powers, and he would eat his yucca mein, and he was like, guess what? I never get sick on chemo. Must be the yucca mein. Long story short, a few months later, he went back to the doctor, and his colon cancer was completely gone. Completely gone, and they removed the colostomy bag, hooked him back up again, and shook and scratched their heads. And they invited him in for an interview, and they're like, well, what did you do? And he's like, well, it's the soup, The truth is that later, 5-6 years later, when he was in the VA and he wanted to go home, he's like, would you please bring me some bowls of yucca mein? And I did. He went home, soon after. The truth is, if I ate that soup, probably nothing would happen. If you ate that soup, maybe nothing would happen. One of the things that Jesus said over and over again in his healings is, your faith has made you well. So sometimes there's a hook. There's faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And again, it's that triggering of healing. It is a mystery. Now, shamans have a different idea of healing than we do. There is a difference between a cure and healing. In Western medicine, we go for the cure. In shamanic healing, we go for the entire soul to be healed. And one of the things, a man by the name of Alberto Vilodo. He has written a number of books about shamanism, and he studied with the shamans for about 25 years. And he said that in shamanism, they're looking to heal the soul, and that in Western, again, we're seeking the cure. So for instance, you could go in for surgery and have something removed, and so there's a cure. But if the pattern in life isn't changed, which is what shamans believe needs to be changed, there is a blueprint that's happening underneath us, then we will go back, we repeat the same patterns, and we end up right where we were before. So the true healing then comes in the changing of the blueprint and of the pattern. And one of the things that Alberto says is that if you discover a repetitive pattern happening in your life, then there's something at a very deep level that needs to be healed in you. And you know, it's like, you know, we move, but we end up hanging out with the same kind of people, or we change relationships or change jobs. Have you ever noticed that, where the pattern is the same? And so in order to be fully released and healed, there needs to be a releasing of that blueprint, a releasing of that pattern, according to shamanistic thinking. The other thing that Alberto was saying is that we are raised in our culture in a language of war. You know, we use war language a lot, and we also use a language of being a victim. You know, my family and my parents and my this and my that. And he said in more indigenous cultures, the story is more around interconnectedness. It's interconnectedness amongst people, it's interconnectedness amongst species, interconnectedness amongst generations, and interconnectedness with the planet. So there's a fuller picture there of the healing of the planet that is also taking place. He said he had a teacher, and his teacher would say to him, "We are here not only to grow corn, but to grow gods." Yeah. So one of the ways I think that we can move into healing is by giving up our stories, by being willing to release and let go of that. And Jesus demonstrated this in the book of John, I think it's 20, with the man who was at the pool in Bethesda, and he was crippled and he couldn't get up, and he was at the pool in Bethesda every day, I assume, for 38 years. 38 years. He shows up. This is this guy's job. This is his life. This is what he does. He gets up, he goes and he sits by the pool near Bethesda, and then he never gets to the pool. So Jesus shows up, and the guy is laying there, and the guy says, "Could you help me get to the pool?" And Jesus says, "How long have you been here?" He says, "I've been here 38 years. And he's like, "How come you can't get to the pool?" He says, "Everybody's always there before me. I don't know. I try to get there, and everybody's there before me." Sound familiar? I mean, it's like sometimes we tell our stories, and why can't you? Well, because, over and over again. And Jesus doesn't buy his story. Jesus says, pick up your bed and walk. Pick up your bed and walk. Forget the pattern, forget the story, forget the victim, just release it and let it go. And in that moment, the man has an instantaneous healing. So for us, when we look at that, it's like, what story perhaps are we carrying around about ourselves? You know, Myrtle Fillmore again, she talked about how she was told from the time she was a little girl that she was going to have tuberculosis because people in her family had it, and she just inherited it. And that's why that phrase for her, "I am a child of God, and I do not inherit sickness."